This is the Sunday stream opening song because the other song is copyrighted. La 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 la. Oh, look, here comes Dog Cat Fox.
Hi, Sky.
Whoops. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Sunday stream, the stream I do on Sundays, because Sunday is the day to stream on Sundays, and also leave up the FBI warning fair use overlay, which I should have turned off while the opening video was playing. But hey, you know, it's Sunday. My brain's still waking up. How are you? Hope everybody's doing well on this beautiful Sunday morning. Actually kind of overcast out right now, but it'll probably get hot later. Man, it has been a week. It has been a busy week. It's been a hectic week. A lot of stuff going on, both productive and trying, let's say. But here we are. Rock us like a hurricane. And here I am to take a breather, to learn something, to find out what's going on in the world, and interact with all of you. And so I hope you're all doing well. And I hope that this meager broadcast brings you some information, some entertainment, some insight, whether it's mine or, you know, the varied brilliance of the news media as we proceed. I'll find my words somewhere in here. But otherwise, before I get to all that, who's joining me on this beautiful Sunday morning? Noah Sencio, good morning. Molly Okami, good morning. Kiever Denmother, good morning. And thank you, Kiever Dam, as always, for providing the links to our friends Moonshock, Natalie, Angela Ariaga, Rhonda, and Ashley. If you guys can take a look at their fundraisers at the top of the chat box and donate if you can, or share if you are able. Either way, appreciate it ahead of time. And thank you, Kiever Dam, as always, for providing those. Fun Time Bats, good morning. John Triaxon, good morning. Old Guy Gamer, good morning. Simon Willikins, good morning. I guess I'll stay up for this and possibly lunch, but afterwards I'll have to take a long nap. Well, you do what's best for you, Simon. Get rest if you need it. This will be here for you when you're done. Advocatus Diaboli, good morning. Mike R., good morning. Woodcutta, good morning. Somnamnul Nation, good morning. Kiro Soldier, good morning. Fostonia, good morning. Shady Grin, good morning. TF good morning. Who else is here? Keldrig, good morning to you. Professor Chaos, good morning. Michael Sander, happy Sunday to you as well. Mike Savage, Blarg. Matthew James, good morning. Who else is here? Anybody else? Oh, Shadowclaw, good morning. Tall Person, good morning to you. Hoko Sports, good morning to you. Tier Alexander, the Scourge, good morning. Good boy, oh boy, lots of people here today. I think that's everybody. If I missed you, if you're lurking, if you're in the future, good morning. So yes, a lot of things happened this week. Boy, howdy. Setting aside my personal world, in the other world, the regular world, a lot of things happen, both political and legal and elsewise. So I thought I'd go over some of the stories that were big this week, because in the flux and flow of everything going on in work and otherwise in my life, some things kind of got by the wayside. And so I need to know, because I don't know. I've heard things. I've heard people, interpret things here, there, and otherwise, or little bits and pieces, but I want to understand. I want to understand a lot of things. One of the things I want to understand is affirmative action. It's gone, guys. It really is. It's gone. It has been legally brought down by the Supreme Court as of last year. And I read this headline from the Washington Post yesterday, and a little, I got a little itch at the back of my brain, just a little itch, and I was thinking to myself, is this true? Because I'm not sure. And what is it that I'm asking is true or not? Race was once factored into college admissions. Now it's factored out. 1 year after the Supreme Court's landmark affirmative action decision, the ruling's race-neutral model is being followed at colleges across the country. When I read that, I thought to myself, I bet it is. I bet by the letter of the law, it is. But I have to be suspicious that colleges and universities aren't still making concessions, privately or otherwise, to still try to achieve the same results as if they could discriminate on the basis of race. Before I proceed, Derek LaRue, thank you so much, as always, for your continued support and generosity. Hope you're having a good Sunday morning, and I hope you enjoy the show. Thank you again. Also, good morning, Vader35 and TC. Good morning to you. All right, so let's find out if this isn't just a sugar-coated assessment of things. When the Supreme Court overturned race-conscious college admissions last June, Adrienne Odie and other administrators at Queen's University paused their Board of Trustees meeting to acknowledge that their world was entering a new era. Yes, we can no longer be systematically racist, everybody. Though Queens did not factor race into admissions decisions, like the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill and Harvard University, well, then what changed? The schools at the center of the ruling, upending 40 years of precedent, officials at the Charlotte campus knew they would have to act. Even acknowledging a student's race in admissions discussions could now pose a degree of legal peril. Yes, you should be wary of using race as a factor of assessment in somebody's ability or quality. It's true, especially in an official capacity, especially in an organization that accepts federal funding under Title VI and the 14th Amendment. It's true. It's true. It's not just something you can make a joke of anymore. That day, Odie, Vice President of Strategic Enrollment and Communications at Queens, published an open letter on the university's website, noting that admissions officials had lost an, quote, essential tool in our toolkit by losing a defining piece of each student's story, of each student's identity, unquote. Stop right there. Obviously, somebody did not read the actual decision by the Supreme Court and the opinion of certain justices therein. Okay. The reality of someone's race, as it pertains to their personal story, can still be submitted and considered, but their race alone is verboten. If somebody says, I came to this country, or I had this experience in my home country, or I had this thing happen to me, and it's a story of truth, and it resolves or revolves around their race in some way, shape, or form, that's perfectly fine. And school boards or school admissions can take into consideration that as part of their story, but they can't see race alone as a factor for evaluation or a plus or minus. So someone here didn't actually read the decision, and someone here is overreacting. But at the same time, it says something else, doesn't it? It says that this university, or at least specifically this Vice President of Strategic Enrollment and Communications, really, really, really wants race to matter. A defining piece of each student's story, of each student's identity. Your race does not define your story. Your race is not an identity. Your race is an identity if you're a racist, but racial identitarianism is poison. So she said quite a bit there without saying a whole lot. A year later, many of the nation's most selective universities have snapped into compliance with the court's vision of a colorblind America, reconsidering all the ways they use race as a factor. Well, good. But that vision has reverberated far beyond academia, as it should. Programs meant to diversify companies, public boards, and government contractors face a legal onslaught unleashed by the landmark ruling pushing American society at large towards a new race-neutral era. No, actually what it did was, and this is the stupid thing, it reminded people that Title VII exists. I mean, all these DEI programs and all these grant programs and everything else, whether specifically to the law or by the spirit of the law, the Civil Rights Act of 1964 happened in 1964. Title VII has been there the whole time, but all these companies and organizations have gotten away with violating it blatantly because there are no consequences to it. But now that the Supreme Court has said something about Title VI, which relates to Title VII in spirit and function, now suddenly everybody's running scared. They should have been running scared the whole time. We should have never gotten to this point. But there was no enforcement. There was no downside. There was no consequence. You had politicians and pundits and entertainers and everybody else cheering this stuff on and calling it good. when it's decidedly not good. While the changes at colleges like Harvard have been dramatic, really? So Harvard was really racist. Okay. The principle of race neutrality is being felt more subtly at universities like Queen's that accept more applicants than they turn away. Odie said the ruling brought more of an, quote, emotional shift than a practical shift, unquote, to her office. Well, what does that tell you? And described how she blinds herself to a student's race if the student mentions it in an application essay. Okay, stop it. Again, you did not read the decision. You did not read the opinion by the justices, did you? The Supreme Court wrote that students could discuss race so long as it's relevant to an experience, yes, such as a time they overcame racial discrimination. Yes, if it is relevant to an experience, not as its own factor of plus or minus. And yeah, there is a gray area there, right? There is a gray area. If you have an admissions officer who is so hell-bent on populating the student body with the correct look, you can't tell by just them reading an application and somebody mentions their race in the course of it. They volunteered of their own accord. They're not asked it on an application or something else. And they decide in their mind, because they have biases, oh, this person now gets a plus rather than a minus simply on the basis of their race. You can't do anything about that part of it, right? But you can't make it an explicit requirement that somebody's got to fill out that could be seen as an element of assessment. It's always going to be there, right? Question is, how much and how often and how hard do they try to get around the legal restrictions to indulge in their ideological desires? You can't necessarily regulate that away. If somebody decides to do that, but anyway. Before the ruling, Odie said she could brighten certain parts of an applicant's identity while evaluating them holistically. That's wait. You want to brighten. So you would highlight something about a person's identity while evaluating them holistically. These two things do not work. You cannot elevate certain parts of someone's quote unquote identity, but then say you're evaluating them holistically. Right? You're putting a pin in some for some elements and setting others aside. Are you even listening to yourself? Before the ruling, Odie said she could brighten certain parts of an applicant's identity while evaluating them holistically, including the applicant's race and ethnicity, you don't say. If a student wrote about being a biracial woman with a father from the Philippines, for example, okay, an admissions official might note that the university does not see many Filipinos in the applicant pool and that, quote, we would love to have more Filipinos in the community, unquote, Odie said, posing a hypothetical. Well, you'd love to have because they're Filipino? Right. Yeah, so you're elevating their ethnicity or their race over their merit simply on the basis of an aesthetic desire. Can you believe that? Okay. I'm at the very least, I'm glad for the candor. She's making that as though it's some kind of complaint. Like, oh, we really wanted to be able to have more Filipinos in the community, but now we can't make those decisions. Oh, you poor, poor thing. But today, she said, that conversation would not happen at Queen's. Good. In fact, Odie said she feels barred from acting on the student's racial information at all. Good. This is the whole point. This was the whole point of Title VII and Title VI, to make you afraid. To make you afraid. Right? What are laws? What are laws? Laws are a confession of human fallibility and an expressed intent to move past them. Exactly. You should feel fear. You should focus on merit and not their aesthetic. Good. This is the whole point. Instead of brightening that aspect of a student's identity, she feels forced to erase it. Well, let me ask you, is it relevant to your assessment of the potential student? If the answer is no, then good. And that it has instilled in her a sense of sadness, not necessarily for herself, but rather for the students who may feel dissuaded from writing about their whole selves, including race and ethnicity. Oh, oh, oh no. Oh, won't somebody please think of the students? Quote, I want to live in a world where people can know and be known fully, unquote, she said. Well, tell me, Vice President, what does a person's race or ethnicity tell you about them as a full person? Tell me. Go ahead. List for me the things that you know about a person based on their race or ethnicity. I will shut my mouth and keep my ears wide open. I would love to know. The true impact of the ruling may not be clear for some time. Well, it's pretty clear to me. It was pretty clear in 1964. In the fall, universities will report the racial makeup of their freshman class. Why? Why? Some schools may do so this summer after students have been admitted and committed to attend. Early research suggests the ruling's impact could be relatively minor. Only a fifth of all U.S. colleges put substantial weight on race in admissions decisions, according to a November 2023 Brookings Institution study. Yeah, only a fifth of all U.S. colleges put substantial weight on race admissions that they have admitted to and have on paper. I'm more excited. I'm more glad that, like our speaker, so to speak, in this article has said, that the ruling makes people very wary of making any decisions that could be construed as being fueled by racial consideration. Whether you're a college that has admitted to it or not. That's the thing I'm glad for. A study by the Common App, okay, a nonprofit whose application is used by more than 1,000 members of colleges, 1,000 members of colleges. Oh, sorry, 1,000 member colleges. Pardon me. Never heard of it. What does it do? Okay. They found no major changes in the racial and ethnic composition of its applicant pool in the 2023-2024 admission season. Okay, well, you got two options there then. Either the race-based admissions practices were effectively irrelevant the whole time, so who cares that they're gone? Or they've been made unconstitutional, let's say. Or the admissions departments are still trying to find ways to discriminate in favor of their ideological ends. One of the two things, right? I guess we'll find out. Nor did it see any significant deviations from previous trends in how students self-identify their race and ethnicity on the form, or how students write about race and ethnicity in their essays. Right. Because again, even though the official ability of colleges to use race as an assessment factor does not restrict a student from mentioning it of their own volition and accord in a form letter or in a cover letter, right? So in an application, they can no longer ask or make use of someone's race in evaluation, but students are free to say so. And admissions departments are free in their own minds, in their own biases, to still put somebody at the top of the pile simply on the basis of their race if they choose so. The question is whether or not you can prove it, but I guess we'll see over time. Zachary Bleemer, an assistant professor of economics at Princeton University, said states that have banned affirmative action at public universities may offer the best preview of the ruling's potential implications, such as California, Texas, and Michigan, which all have highly selective public universities, saw immediate and significant declines in Black and Hispanic enrollment at their flagship institutions after state officials prohibited them from considering race in admissions. And what does that tell you? What does that tell you? After California voters banned affirmative action at state universities in 1996, the University of California system saw a 12% drop in underrepresented groups, while campuses in Berkeley and Los Angeles both reported more than 40% declines, according to Bleemer's research. Over time, those numbers have climbed at the most selective UC campuses, which have used multiple strategies to bolster diversity. Like I say, they're looking for anything they can do short of actually saying race. They look for zip codes. They start advertising in specific places, at specific organizations. They try to recruit from specific places based on race. Doing everything but using race as part of the admissions process, but having plenty of things at the front end, trying to make sure they gather up the right kind of people. Does that make it better, you think, ultimately? Which have used multiple strategies to bolster diversity, in part also because of growth in the state's Hispanic population. Okay. But the race neutral alternatives increased enrollment of underrepresented minorities far less than affirmative action. Huh. Because merit had to matter first, did it? Okay. It's harder to predict what might happen at highly competitive private universities, Bleemer said. They may be guided by the experiences of the public schools, which have deployed a variety of strategies to try to maintain diversity. You just kind of said that in the previous paragraph. Some worked well, such as a holistic review, in which admissions officers factor in many elements of a student's academic and extracurricular performance, as well as personal characteristics. Heaven forfend, but some have not been particularly successful. Well, how do you define success? If you define success by the aesthetic makeup of your demographic population based on race, and you don't see the kinds of skin colors you like, but you have a bunch of people there who have passed the merit test, that's not successful? Okay. Still, some experts contend schools can maintain diversity without affirmative action through strategies such as increasing financial aid for students from low income families. Oh, so if you're the right color, you're poor? Investing in pipeline programs that put a emphasis on someone's race, intensifying recruitment and efforts like fly-ins that bring prospective students to campus. But those initiatives are more expensive. Well, I guess how much does simply the look of your school mean to you then? Administrators say assessing the ruling's impact is also complicated by another crisis in higher education: widespread delays in students receiving financial aid offers. Disastrous technical glitches related to the new federal student aid form could affect where and whether students attend college, especially students from low income families. And as we know, anyone not white is obviously poor, I guess. Quote, what I'm nervous about is misinterpretations because so many things have impacted this year's data, said Kendra Iship, Vice President of Enrollment Management at the University of Southern California. Quote, it's going to be really hard to extrapolate what this year looks like, unquote. Okay. And look is the primary concern. The delays are weighing on efforts to maintain campus diversity, more perhaps than the Supreme Court ruling, some admissions officials said. Okay, so delays based on technical glitches. Well, that's completely separate and has nothing to do with the Supreme Court's ruling. So, okay, fix your technical glitches. Quote, our approach this entire year has been to alleviate as much stress and pressure on students and families because we had these two really big changes happen within a couple of months from one another, unquote, Odie said, noting that the two variables will probably work together to change the racial and ethnic demographics on campus. And who cares? Does it change the merit-based demographics on campus? See how they cannot escape and they cannot let go of their primary concern? The look. Legal experts said the Supreme Court ruling is likely to pose long-term questions for universities having to transition to race-neutral admissions. Yeah, questions like, golly gee whiz, have we been systemically racist to the detriment of qualified students for years and years and years now? Yeah, I know it's a tough thing to have to face. Quote, it's hard to overstate the sea change effect that occurred and is, frankly, still occurring because now there's a second and third generation set of questions emerging, unquote, said Art Coleman, managing partner and co-founder of Education Council, which is guiding universities as they seek to comply with the Supreme Court decision. Education Council sounds like a consulting firm getting a big paycheck for this. Ooh. Quote, what does this mean for financial aid and scholarships? Well, I think you answered your own question there. Is a student qualified by merit but unable to attend because of money? Well, then perhaps they are worthy of financial aid. And there's a certain word inside that word called scholarships. It's called scholar. Has this person demonstrated that they are a scholar worthy of a financial grant? What does any of this have to do with race, might I ask? What does this mean for nonprofit organizations that are partners with institutions that may have a racial focus? Honestly, I don't know. I don't know, but I am fascinated to find out. How about we stop doing race-specific colleges as a good thing? You know, how about we think about that whole, oh, I don't know, desegregation thing that happened all those years ago? A historically black college and university. That term is hanging on to the worst parts of our education system, but yet holding it up as though it's some kind of virtue or something to be admired. It's not. It's clinging to the worst of our past. They don't seem to want to admit that, though. The advocates for affirmative action, things like that. What does this mean for issues of sex and gender beyond the question of race and national origin? I don't know, Mr. Coleman. What do you think it should mean when it's talking about? Do you understand what affirmative action was? Okay, I don't know. How often do you contemplate the sex and gender question when it comes to race and I don't know. Quote, all of the questions the court did not specifically address, there are ripple effects and implications here, unquote. You're right. You're right. There are ripple effects and implications. Like, hey, what else is listed on Title VI besides race that is on equal footing with race when it comes to considerations by institutions that accept federal funding? You want to list off all those other things that are on equal legal footing with race as things thou shalt not discriminate on the basis of? Could it have to do with gender and sex? Yes. So maybe you need to consider that too. Golly gee, am I going to put this person at the top of the pile because of their gender? Uh-oh, that might also be a problem. Yeah. Yeah, these are the questions you have to ask yourself according to the law. Oh no. The University of Connecticut chose to keep applicants' self-reported racial data sealed to avoid any possible appearance of influence, said Vern Granger, director of undergraduate admissions. Although the college for years has used a system of review that uses the quote-unquote full picture of a student to make decisions, this year the checkboxes indicating race were not visible to application readers. But those readers were able to consider applicants' life experiences, including how race impacted them, he said, as described in essays and letters of recommendation. Exactly. And that is within the boundaries of the court's decision. If you can believe it, this article has not yet mentioned that explicit statement in the court's opinion regarding their ruling. And yet, okay. Quote, we had our general counsel's office come and do a couple of sessions with our readers, just reiterating holistic review and their professional judgment, unquote, Granger said. Odie, the Queen's administrator, said her office made similar operational changes, redacting race reporting on applications and instructing readers not to consider racial information if it's apparent in an essay or a list of extracurricular activities. But Odie said Queens has long been able to achieve campus diversity without explicit racial considerations. Then what are you complaining about? If you found a way to meet your personal quotas for aesthetics in your student population without explicit considerations, then what is the problem? If affirmative action was never that big of a deal in your school, then it's not really a loss, is it? The university dispatches recruiters to every high school in Charlotte and tries to visit a variety of public high schools outside the city, delivering an, quote, inclusive, unquote, message that encourages applicants to apply no matter their backgrounds. Then what do you care what the result is aesthetically? But you do. You just told us you do. In last year's incoming class, about half of students identified as white, she said, while Black and Hispanic people each made up about 14%. Huh. It almost sounds like in proportion to national demographics, doesn't it? Wow, it's amazing. Imagine that. Another 5.5% identified as multiracial and 2% as Asian. Wow, what does the national racial demographic mix look like? Sounds pretty balanced. Sounds like a reflection of our world. Odie said that the optimist in her, sees the Supreme Court ruling as an opportunity to test new strategies that can help schools reach new students. But as an administrator who has read tens of thousands of student applications over her career, she also feels a sense of loss. Quote, for some students who are ready, willing, interested in engaging in topics around race and ethnicity and how important their individual racial and ethnic identity is to them, we can receive that information, but we can't advocate, unquote, Odie said. Oh, no. That means she can't always see students in the ways they want to be seen. Oh, you poor thing. You can't see students in the ways they want to be seen as an inherent victim or thinking that their race should give them something for nothing. Oh no. Oh, how will this country survive if we eliminate another pathway to entitlement on the basis of someone's appearance? Oh my God. Oh, what a shame. What a loss. Oh, whoa is the college admissions official now. That was something else. I didn't think I could become quite that sardonic, but man, that was something else. And again, considering the holistic picture of a student or incoming student or applicant on the basis of their experiences related to race, related to some, somebody comes to this country from another country and they end up in a school, an elementary school where maybe they're one of only a few people that look like them. And it was difficult making friends because of this, that, or the other. Yeah, that's part of your story, right? I mean, in this person's case, hypothetically, their race was the dividing line between getting close to people and making friends and not. In my situation, it was that I was wearing glasses and I was called Four Eyes. Everybody's got something that ended up being a difficulty in their life through no fault of their own. Race isn't special as compared to anything else if the experience is effectively the same. But sure, if you want to, cite a hardship or something and your race, your ethnicity, your culture clash or whatever else was part of the story, that's fine. And the court said that's fine. But you can't make it part of the assessment process. You can't make it part of the application process. You can't risk someone using it as a plus or minus. And students can't be compelled or required to give the college their race as a factor for consideration. And did you hear Clarence Thomas? Everybody says, oh, Clarence Thomas, he benefited from affirmative action. How dare he vote against it? You ever read his assessment of that after the fact? How he wished he could know that he had the opportunities he had in life based on his merit and not because he was given a pity party on the basis of his race, potentially. That's the dividing line. But they don't bring that up here. They don't even mention that. No, it's just one big loss. Oh, it's so difficult now. Oh, how will we proceed? I don't know. Going over the chat for a couple of seconds here to say some more hellos. You're ridiculous lunatic. Good morning. Who else is here? Anybody that I missed otherwise? Kay Scholl. Good morning. Scrolling. Keep them doggies scrolling. I don't see anybody else. So if you want to have a hello, say hello. Or if I missed you, say hello. All right. So that was, yes, the current situation with affirmative action and the terrible, sad, depressing state of admissions officers. Oh, no. Anyway, let's move on, shall we? Let's talk about the Supreme Court. Speaking of the Supreme Court, I guess this, inadvertently turns into kind of a Supreme Court digest. Let's take a look at a couple of rulings that happened this week that I didn't understand the context or enormity of, but everybody else was saying, holy cow, this is a big deal. And I don't know what the big deal is, honestly, so let's find out together. So we'll start off with the first one. What it means for the Supreme Court to throw out Chevron decision undercutting federal regulators. Washington AP, executive branch agencies will likely have more difficulty regulating the environment, public health, workplace safety, and other issues under a far-reaching decision by the Supreme Court. The court's 6-3 ruling on Friday overturned a 1984 decision colloquially, I hate that word, colloquially known as Chevron, that has instructed lower courts to defer to federal agencies when laws passed by Congress are not crystal clear. Okay, I haven't read this article, so let's consider that notion for a second. Lower courts have to defer to federal agencies when laws passed by Congress are not crystal clear. So it is not then incumbent upon Congress to clarify the law. Instead, those ambiguities fall to federal agencies with either appointed or unelected individuals making decisions about the negative space in the law. I'm sure there have been no problems that have arisen from that. The 40-year-old decision has been the basis for upholding thousands of regulations by dozens of federal agencies. Yeah, apparently outside the strictures of written law, but has long been a target of conservatives and business groups who argue that it grants too much power to the executive branch, or what some critics call the administrative state. Well, it certainly has that potential, doesn't it? Gosh, you know what's going to happen now? Boy, if there's an ambiguity in law, Congress will have to do their jobs. Oh my gosh, can you believe it? The Biden administration has defended the law. Of course it has. Any executive branch probably would. Warning that overturning so-called Chevron deference would be destabilizing and could bring a, quote, convulsive shock to the nation's legal system. Right, with so many holes in the laws that have to be plugged up by the people paid to actually do that work. I know, how terrible for our representatives in government who are elected to do this stuff. Now, thank you, Matthew James. Thank you for responding to my book question. Keep up the good work on your channel. Thank you so much, Matthew. Appreciate it. Thank you very much for your generosity, and hope you're enjoying the show and that you're having a good Sunday. Thank you, Matthew. Let's see. Okay. Chief Justice John Roberts, writing for the court, said federal judges, quote, must exercise their independent judgment in deciding whether an agency has acted within its statutory authority, unquote. I agree. Because if you don't keep the people who are supposed to be, restrained by the law, then they can act lawlessly. The ruling does not call into question prior cases that relied on the Chevron doctrine, Roberts wrote. Okay, so it's not retroactive. That's probably a big sigh of relief for a lot of people. Here is a look at what the court's decision and the implications for government regulations going forward. Sorry, a look at the court's decision. What is the Chevron decision? Atlantic herring fishermen sued over federal rules requiring them to pay for independent observers to monitor their catch. The fishermen argued that the 1976 Magnuson-Stevens Fishery Conservation and Management Act did not authorize officials to create industry-funded monitoring requirements and that the National Marine Fisheries Service failed to follow proper rulemaking procedure. In two related cases, the fishermen asked the court to overturn the 40-year-old Chevron doctrine, which stems from a unanimous Supreme Court case involving the energy giant in a dispute over the Clean Air Act. That ruling said judges should defer to the executive branch when laws passed by Congress are ambiguous. Again, that's extending executive power quite a bit. Wherever Congress did not act clearly, there lies executive decision and authority. Okay. In that case, the court upheld an action by the Environmental Protection Agency under then President Ronald Reagan. In the decades following the ruling, Chevron has been a bedrock of modern administrative law, requiring judges to defer to agencies' reasonable interpretations of congressional statutes. You know what? I don't even know that we got into the partisan aspect of this yet. But you know what? This is happy news. This is happy news for anybody who is never Trump. Because as compared to when he was president, if Trump becomes president again, he'll have less power in the executive branch. This should be happy news, right? But the current high court, with a 6-3 conservative majority, has been increasingly skeptical of the powers of federal agencies. Justices Brett Kavanaugh, Clarence Thomas, Samuel Alito, and Neil Gorsuch have questioned the Chevron decision. The Chevron decision. I'm going all Sean Connery here. Chevron. Ironically, it was Gorsuch's mother, former EPA Administrator Ann Gorsuch, who made the decision that the Supreme Court upheld in 1984. What, you mean he defied his own mother? A conservative justice went against his own mother? Is that even possible? What's at stake? With a closely divided Congress, presidential administrations have increasingly turned to federal regulation to implement policy changes. Oh boy, howdy, have they. Tell me about immigration law. Federal rules impact virtually every aspect of everyday life, from the food we eat and the cars we drive to the air we breathe and homes we live in. President Joe Biden's administration, for example, has issued a host of new regulations on the environment and other priorities, including restrictions on emissions from power plants and vehicle tailpipes, and rules on student loan forgiveness, overtime pay, and affordable housing. Yes, it's almost like the president has way too much power in some instances, and really it should be Congress plugging these holes, as is their remit. But oh well. Those actions and others could be open to legal challenges if judges are allowed to discount or disregard the expertise of the executive branch agencies that put them in the place. Well, good. More checks and balances on governmental power? Oh, no. This is like the last thing. This is like the affirmative action thing where all the admissions officers were like, oh, you mean we actually have to stay within the bounds of the established law? Oh, heaven help us. It's amazing how these two completely separate things are so similar. With billions of dollars potentially at stake, groups representing the gun industry and other businesses such as tobacco, agriculture, timber, and home building were among those pressing the justices to overturn the Chevron doctrine and weaken government regulation. Well, all this does is put the onus on Congress to actually examine and update the laws. Heaven forfend. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce filed an amicus brief last year on behalf of business groups, arguing that modern application of Chevron, quote, has fostered aggrandizement, unquote, of the executive branch at the expense of Congress and the courts. I think simply on the basis of its function, that is an absolute truth. David Doniger, a lawyer and longtime Natural Resources Defense Council official who argued the original Chevron case in 1984, said he feared that a ruling to overturn the doctrine would, quote, free judges to be radical activists, unquote, who could, quote, effectively rewrite our laws and block the protections they're supposed to provide. Well then, sir, maybe you need to call your congressman and give him a list of those things that they need to start fixing, as is their job. Quote, the net effect will be to weaken our government's ability to meet the real problems the world is throwing at us. Big things like COVID and climate change, Doniger said. Oh no, are you telling me that the federal government will be restricted from taking policy action on things like COVID and climate change outside of congressional authority? Oh no! Oh God! All right, did these guys even listen to themselves? Because boy, howdy, I tell you, the COVID example, boy, man, if ever there was just a winning, stunning case of governmental perfection in a time of crisis, I can't tell you. I just more than just fish. This case was never just about fish, you don't say, said Meredith Moore of the environmental group Ocean Conservancy. Instead, businesses and other interest groups use the herring fishery, quote, to attack the foundations of the public agencies that serve the American public and conserve our natural resources, unquote, she said. Yes, they serve the public agencies, the American public. Under what rules? Oh, yeah, that's right. It's called the law, federal law, local law, etc., and so forth. And who's there to plug up the holes when there's an ambiguity or a gray area? That's right, Congress. Your legislators, except they've been given a free ride for years to actually have to do their jobs and make tough decisions because they just defer to the federal government when there's not a clear answer. Well, now those answers will have to be clarified, won't they? And who's going to have to do that work? The people paid to do that work. Oh, no. The court ruling will likely open the floodgates to litigation that could erode critical protections for people and the environment, Moore and other advocates said. Or it could strengthen our laws and empower the Congress over the executive like it is supposed to. I know, that whole checks and balances thing. Oh, man, what a What a terrible idea that was. Quote, for more than 30 years, fishery observers have successfully helped ensure that our oceans are responsibly managed so that fishing can continue in the future, unquote, said Dustin Craner of Oceana, another conservation group. Great. And he called the case, quote, just the latest example of the far right trying to undermine the federal government's ability to protect our oceans, waters, public lands, clean air, and health, unquote. The far right, the executive branch just had its power reduced significantly. And yeah, because, the far right has always been about reducing executive power in recent years. Yeah, the Republicans have never cheered on the executive branch when it was in their interest. No. They've worked so hard to curtail the executive branch. West Virginia Attorney General Patrick Moore. Wasn't this decision made under Reagan, for crying out loud? Were the Republicans all up in arms at that point, saying, no, do not give Ronald Reagan more power? West Virginia Attorney General Patrick Morrisey called the decision a fitting follow-up to a 2022 decision, in a case he brought, that limits the EPA's ability to control greenhouse gas emissions from power plants. The court held that Congress must speak with specificity when it wants to give an agency authority to regulate on an issue of major national significance. Yes, again, making Congress the branch it should be, the check and balance it should be, putting the onus on Congress to do their jobs. They are the legislators. The executive branch is not the legislation. Why is this such... Morrisey, now the GOP nominee for governor, called Chevron, quote, a misguided doctrine under which courts defer to legally dubious interpretations of statutes put out by federal administrative agencies. Well, that's exactly what it does, isn't it? He's not saying anything conspiratorial or right-wing. He's saying what it does. A shift towards judicial power. The Supreme Court ruling will almost certainly shift power away from the executive branch and Congress and toward courts, said Craig Green, a professor at Temple University's Beasley School of Law. Well, if Congress does not act, then yes, that is the last stop, isn't it? If Congress leaves an ambiguity, it's going to have to be interpreted by judges to the best of their ability. If you want to stop activist judges, you take away their room to maneuver. They can only act within the law as written. And when there's an ambiguity, when there's something that falls to their prerogative, that's when they make a decision. So if you want judges not to be activists, don't allow them to act. Is this... Okay, I'm an English major. I am not a political scientist. Okay? I am not a policy analyst. I'm not a constitutional scholar. If I am completely off base, please, and I mean this sincerely, let me know in the chat or in the comments. But isn't this how it is supposed to work? Isn't this supposed to be the balance of power between the three branches? Or am I just off my nut here? Federal judges will now have the first and final word about what statutes mean, he said. That's a big shift in power. No, it's it's not. That's exactly what they're there to do. They're there to interpret the law. That's what judges do. What are you talking about? In what some observers see as a historic irony, many conservatives who now attack Chevron once celebrated it. Oh, so it's not exactly a partisan issue, is it? The late Supreme Court Justice Antonin Scalia was amongst those who hailed the original ruling as a way to rein in liberal laws. Well, how the winds have shifted, huh? Quote, conservatives believed in this rule until they didn't, unquote, Green said in an interview. Oh, okay. So it was just a right-wing it was a left-wing no, wait, what? In recent years, conservatives have focused on, quote, deconstruction of the administrative state, unquote, even if the result lessens the ability of a conservative president to impose his beliefs on government agencies. Oh, so they're making decisions that might actually be against their own political or power interests in the future. But because it's the right thing to do? Because it's the logical thing to do? Oh. So, what is the complaint again? Quote, if you weaken the federal government, you get less government, Green said. Well, that seems to be the point. The government should only be where it needs to be, right? An outcome that many conservatives, including those who back former President Donald Trump, welcome. Oh, so the court ruled against the interests of Donald Trump's potential power base in the future. So I'm confused. Is Mr. Green for or against this decision? Is he complaining about it, or is he glad it happened? Or is he trying to tell Republicans, you've done a bad thing to yourselves? The ruling will likely gum up the works for federal agencies and make it even harder for them to address big problems, which is precisely what the critics of Chevron want, unquote, said Jody Freeman, director of the Environmental and Energy Law Program at Harvard Law School. Yeah, heaven forfend, the three branches of government actually have to do their jobs and are restricted from going beyond their remit. I know, it's a crazy idea. How will they adjust? Well, I don't know. Just do your job. Pretty simple to me. I'm sure it'll be a lot of work. I'm sure it'll be a lot of headaches for people who've enjoyed the freedom elsewise to this point. But again, am I missing something? Well, Advocaz Diablo says this is exactly how it's supposed to work. That's what seems to me. Let's see. Matthew James, there's only far right and rhinos. Possibly so. Yeah, that was a very confusing summation there by our critic or supporter or whatever of the decision. Like, make up your mind. What? Anyway, so that was the Chevron decision. So in short, if there is an ambiguity in the law, federal judges have to interpret it. And if Congress does not act to plug up those holes in the law where ambiguities exist, then judges make those decisions and the federal agency have to abide by those decisions. If Congress acts and changes or revises or updates the law to address those problems, then judges are forced to work within those strictures and pass that on to the federal agencies, and they have to act within the law. That's the whole idea. That's the whole idea. Anyway, let's move on to the second big decision this week. Let me zoom in on this a little bit. There we go. Let's see. Shadowclaw, please don't take away our abuse of power potential. I know. It's amazing, huh? This should be, like I say, this should be good news to everybody on the left. A potential Donald Trump will come into office with less power than he had before when he was president previously. Imagine that. Fostonia, thank you so much for the thank you, happy, Nancy, Dogcat Fox. Oh, Dogcat Fox.
Wowee, wow.
Oh, there's an irate Alex Dogcat Fox. Also, I found this out belatedly because, the time Twitter and what I will see on Twitter and such. Irate Alex is now once again expecting to be a father. I know. It's crazy. One might be concerned even. But yeah, he and Nikki are having a baby. Nikki Bear. And Nikki is over the moon, as she said. And I said, well, I'm waving to you from the moon because that's where I live. And then she sent me a gif of a waving bear, and it was very funny. Anthem Ward, good morning. And if I didn't already say hello, Darren Root, good morning to you. Anybody else I missed in the way? If you have not yet made yourself known, make yourself known so I can say hello. All right, so the other decision this week, which I, again, just kind of whiffed over my head with everything else going on with work and month-end billing and other things happening, has to deal with January 6th. It'll never leave us. The specter of January 6th will never leave us. U.S. Supreme Court raises bar for obstruction charge against Trump and January 6th rioters. Doesn't sound good for cases against them. The U.S. Supreme Court raised the legal bar on Friday for prosecutors pursuing obstruction charges in the federal election subversion case against Donald Trump and defendants involved in the January 6, 2021 attack on the Capitol. Is it retroactive to people who have already been convicted? I wonder. The justices ruled 6-3 to throw out a lower court's decision that had allowed a charge of corruptly obstructing an official proceeding, congressional certification of President Joe Biden's 2020 victory over Trump that the rioters tried to block, against defendant Joseph Fisher, a former police officer. The court, in the decision authored by Chief Justice John Roberts, took a narrow view on the obstruction statute, saying that prosecutors must show that a defendant, quote, impaired the availability or integrity, unquote, of documents or other records related to an official proceeding, or attempted to do so. Roberts was joined by fellow conservative justices Clarence Thomas, Samuel Alito, Neil Gorsuch, and Brett Kavanaugh, as well as liberal justice Ketanji Brown Jackson. Really? Amazing. Roberts rejected the Justice Department's more expansive reading of what constitutes obstruction, calling it, quote, a novel interpretation that would criminalize a broad swath of prosaic conduct, exposing activists and lobbyists alike to decades in prison, unquote. Wow. Conservative Justice Amy Coney Barrett wrote a dissent, joined by liberal justices Sonia Sotomayor and Elena Kagan. Wait. So you had a liberal justice on the affirming side and you had a conservative justice on the dissent? What madness is this? What? You mean to tell me that their ideological differences were different? What? Fisher had challenged the obstruction charge, which federal prosecutors brought against him and hundreds of others, including Trump, in January 6th related cases. The lower court was directed to reconsider the matter in light of Friday's ruling. The ruling was a potential boost for Trump, the Republican candidate challenging Biden, a Democrat, in the November 5th U.S. election. Trump was hit with 2 obstruction-related charges as part of a 4-count criminal indictment in a case brought last year by special counsel Jack Smith. The crime falls under the 2002 Sarbanes-Oxley Act, a federal law passed after the accounting fraud scandal at now-defunct energy company Enron. Can you imagine that Enron would have an effect on presidential elections 22 years after the fact? That's crazy. Federal prosecutors have accused Trump of pressuring government officials to overturn the 2020 election results and encouraging his supporters to march to the Capitol on January 6 to push Congress not to certify Biden's victory based on false claims of widespread voting fraud. On the day Congress met to certify the results, Trump supporters stormed the Capitol, broke through barricades, attacked police officers, vandalized the building, and forced lawmakers and others to flee for safety. Trump and his allies also devised a plan to use false electors from key states to thwart certification. George Washington University Law School professor Randall Eliason, a former federal prosecutor, said Smith might not be deterred from pursuing the obstruction charges against Trump despite the new higher bar. Okay, well, then I guess it'll be up to the judge in whatever case that occurs to evaluate that. Quote, the court recognizes that submitting false evidence could still violate the statute, so it seems like with the fake elector scheme, the charges should still survive, unquote, Eliason said. Seems like, should? Is that the kind of confidence you want to have somebody go to court with? Okay. The Supreme Court is expected on Monday to issue its ruling on Trump's bid for immunity from prosecution in the federal election subversion case. Trump has pleaded not guilty. That's going to be the big one. Of all the Supreme Court decisions oncoming, that's going to be the big one. Can Trump claim immunity as he was president during the time of all this? I would say probably not. If we want to talk about restricting executive power, I think that's one that needs to be verified. I whether it's Trump or someone else, I don't want a president to be able to just claim immunity for anything that they do in office if it's illegal. That would open up all sorts of problems. Biden's campaign said Friday's ruling, quote, does not change the fundamental truth that Donald Trump will always put himself over our democracy, unquote. Really? Really? This coming from the Biden campaign. The Biden campaign headed by who? Oh, yeah, Joe Biden. Joe Biden, who's so arrogant that when he's obviously incapable of conducting a 2-car parade after the sun has set, that he's staying in office alone and not stepping aside at the very least from the campaign for president again. He's putting himself over democracy. That's pot, meat, kettle. Quote, violent insurrectionists and those who encourage them must be held accountable, but Donald Trump thinks otherwise, unquote, a campaign statement added. Attorney General Merrick Garland expressed disappointment in the ruling. Quote, January 6th was an unprecedented attack on the cornerstone of our system of government, the peaceful transfer of power from one administration to the next, unquote, Garland said, adding that Friday's decision, quote, limits an important federal statute that the department has sought to use to ensure that the most responsible for the attack face appropriate consequences, unquote. The Supreme Court has ruled, Attorney General Merrick Garland. You might be sad, but you're not going to subvert the Supreme Court on this, are you? Okay. The charge carries a sentence of up to 20 years in prison if convicted, though January 6 defendants convicted of obstruction have received far lesser sentences. Well, they've received far lesser sentences. Should they have received them at all, is the question. The question isn't about the amount of time. The question is, should someone have been convicted of this based on the rule of law? Addressing a campaign rally in Virginia, Trump cited Friday's ruling and called for people prosecuted on charges related to the Capitol attack to be released. Quote, free the January 6th hostages now, unquote, Trump said as the crowd cheered. Fisher was accused by prosecutors of charging at police guarding a Capitol entrance. Fisher, at the time a member of the North Cornwall Township Police in Pennsylvania, got inside the building and pressed up against an officer's riot shield as police officers attempted to clear rioters, according to prosecutors. He remained in the Capitol for 4 minutes before police pushed him out, they said. Fisher has been awaiting trial on 6 other criminal counts, including assaulting or impeding officers and civil disorder, while his obstruction challenge played out. Yeah, all this stuff. I mean, think about the recent college riots, right? The pro-Gaza, pro-Palestinian riots on college campuses and things. Think about the clashes between students and police or smashing into buildings and so on and so forth. Most of those guys didn't get charged with anything. You push an officer, you get shoved by an officer and everything else. You might get civil disobedience. You might get a simple assault charge, that kind of thing, depending on the severity of it. But you're not going to get 20 years in prison or risk getting 20 years in prison. So his 4 minutes of pushing against a police shield, it also has added to it an obstruction charge that might not actually apply to anything he was actually doing or actually ended up doing. That's probably the problem there. That's probably the problem. I'm not a lawyer, but I'm just saying. U.S. District Judge Carl Nichols, a Trump appointee, granted Fisher's request to dismiss the obstruction charge, ruling it applies only to defendants who tampered with evidence. The U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia reversed that decision, prompting Fisher's Supreme Court appeal. Federal prosecutors estimate that about 250 of the roughly 1,400 people charged in the Capitol attack could be impacted by the ruling. Probably for better. Probably to their benefit at this point. According to Justice Department data, about 50 January 6 defendants were convicted and sentenced on the obstruction charge with no other felony. Yeah, that could be, yes, if they were convicted of nothing else but obstruction, and obstruction has now been narrowed down to say, did they actually mess with documents? Well, then, yeah, that would kind of have to be thrown out, wouldn't it? That means potentially 50 defendants convicted on nothing but the obstruction of felony alone could have to be released and their cases dismissed. Possibly. Thank you, Hoko Sports. No one has been charged with insurrection. Yeah, you noticed that? I've noticed that too over the last couple of years. Lots of obstruction, lots of vandalism, and so on and so forth. Nobody's been, charged with like treason or insurrection yet or anything. It's crazy, isn't it? And, I haven't heard January 6th referred to as an insurrection lately nearly as much as I did in those early weeks and months. So maybe somebody finally got the message that doesn't actually apply. Barrett said Congress had written the obstruction statute to be, quote, expansive, unquote. Well, yeah, I'm sure. But written it to be expansive. If it doesn't say specifically, then yeah, anyway. Quote, Joseph Fisher allegedly participated in a riot at the Capitol that forced the delay of Congress's joint session on January 6th, the Barrett wrote in dissent. Quote, blocking an official proceeding from moving forward surely qualifies as obstructing or impeding the proceeding by means other than document destruction. Fisher's alleged conduct thus falls within the law's scope, unquote. Well, not according to the Supreme Court. And what is the Supreme Court also called? The court of last resort. So, okay, you're unhappy with it. Now what are you going to do? Trump, in a separate case in New York State Court, was convicted by a jury on May 30th on 34 counts of falsifying documents to cover up hush money paid to porn star to a porn star to avoid a sex scandal before the 2016 election. So, wait, what does this have to do with anything? Trump also has pleaded not guilty to election-related charges in state court in Georgia and federal charges involving classified documents in Florida. So, okay, the article should have ended here. Why add this? What does that have to do with anything? Oh, by the way, guys, Trump is in other cases that have nothing to do with obstruction. Okay, so you give the back and the forth on the ruling, the fors, the against, and so on, and then you summarize everything at the end, or you conclude everything at the end with Trump's other convictions or trials that have nothing to do with January 6th and have nothing to do with an obstruction charge. Okay. Thanks for that relevancy there, Reuters. Just why? Why? Okay. Anyway, also, good morning, Rib Rascal and Daryl Odell. Good morning to you. Anybody else I missed? Oh, Shiro Amada. Good morning to you. And Dances with Aardvarks. Good morning to you. Good morning to you. Good morning to you. Corbin Dallas, multipass. Multipass, Corbin Dallas. Corbin Dallas. Negative. I am a meat popsicle. All right. Well, there you go. Those are the two Supreme Court decisions that were rocking the political and legal world this week. But finally, for today's show, we go over an interesting headline that I saw a little bit from Axios. Now, over the last couple of days, since the debate, wherein we all saw what most people who had a thinking brain already knew, that Joe Biden is mentally unfit to be in office, that Joe Biden can't operate without a teleprompter, that Joe Biden, left to his own devices, wanders off into la la land. And this is the man who is in the Oval Office and has been for years now. But suddenly people are acting like, what? This is amazing. This is amazing revelation. Anybody who's been paying attention to him on camera for the last nigh on 4 years has known this. Anybody who's paid attention to his behavior and the behavior of those around him at campaign speeches or public functions has known this. But it seems to be some kind of new thing. Oh, did you know? How can we possibly know this? And everybody keeps talking about, oh, maybe he should step out of the race. No. He should step down from the presidency. This is a 25th Amendment situation. Any reasonable person isn't thinking, oh, maybe he should just not continue running for president. Maybe he shouldn't be the candidate. He should be out of the office. And I understand that the potential of having Kamala Harris take over is not a welcome one. But I'll tell you what, it's a heck of a lot better than a guy who doesn't even know where he is or what's going on half the time. But anyway, Axios wants us to know, behind the curtain, Biden oligarchy will decide fate. Not Biden. Not Biden, his oligarchy. Let's listen to this. Forget the pundits. Ignore New York Times editorials and columnists. Tune out people popping off on X. The only way President Biden steps aside, despite his debate debacle, is if the same small group of lifelong loyalists who enabled his run suddenly and shockingly decides it's time for him to call it quits. Or there's the 25th Amendment. Why it matters, Dr. Jill Biden, his younger sister Valerie Biden, and 85-year-old Ted Kaufman, the president's longtime friend and constant advisor, plus a small band of White House advisors, are the only Biden deciders. So, a gaggle of unelected individuals, civilians, are running the president, you say. Wow, anything else that they've had their hands in, aside from whether or not Biden will stay in the race over the last 3 some odd years? Anything else? We might want to think about the implications of that, given his performance on Thursday, given the evidence of his behavior and capabilities that we've seen time and time and time again at press conferences and public events. This decades-long kitchen cabinet operates as an extended family, council of elders, and governing oligarchy. These allies alone hold sway over decisions big and small in Biden's life and presidency. How extensive is this sway over the executive branch of government? This unelected cabal. The president engaged in no organized process outside his family in deciding to run for a second term, the New York Times' Peter Baker reports. Well, that's fine. He was a civilian at that point. So, okay. Then Biden alone made the decision, people close to him tell us. Did he, though? Because you're telling us that he's basically at the behest of a kitchen cabinet, a governing oligarchy. Behind the scenes, if Biden stays in, it's for the same reason he decided to run again. Oh, because Donald Trump said there were good people on both sides of the Charlotte incident? Oh, wait. No, sorry. I misheard. He and the oligarchy believe he has a much better chance of beating former President Donald Trump than Vice President Harris does. Can we say delusional? Biden allies have played out the scenarios and see little chance of anyone besides Harris winning the nomination if he stepped aside. Well, I hate to tell you this. What is the function of the vice president? Outside of splitting ties in the Senate, what is the on-paper function of the vice president? Is the Democratic Party going to deny the nomination to the first woman, the first Black American, and the first South Asian American to be elected VP? Hard to see. Yeah, notice how none of those things say anything about her capabilities as a politician. But we already knew that. These allies privately think Harris would struggle to pull moderate and swing voters. Harris couldn't even poll her own state in the primaries back in 2020. Okay? She blew a $40 million war chest and failed miserably. She was practically a forgotten element by the time they got to the primary elections. She was only resurrected from irrelevance because Biden picked her to be vice president. That's it. I mean, you think she would struggle? Yeah. Harris fares only 1 or 2 points worse than Biden in polls with margins of sampling error that are much larger than that, the Washington Post found. The intrigue. We're told Democratic congressional leaders are one outside force that could bring pressure on Biden. But then you'd have Kamala Harris. Or you have to deny her. And how would that look? You guys have... The Democratic Party has built their own prison on this one. This is their own fault. They're getting calls and texts from panicked lawmakers who fear Biden's weakness could cost the party House and Senate seats in November. Well, good. You know what? Whether it was Democratic or Republican decisions that led to putting a feeble, mentally questionable, elderly man in the Oval Office and pair him with an absolute failure of a politician as a vice president, and then go on for 4 years hoping that the bailing gum and bubble wire, bailing gum and bubble wire. Boy, oh boy, I had my Biden moment. I'm trying to be so, enthusiastic and everything. I get vocabulary aphasia. Bailing gum and bubble wire. That's what that's what this campaign is running on. I'm going to keep it. I'm going to leave it in. I'm doing it live. I'm leaving it in. Bailing gum and bubble wire is what's holding the Biden campaign together. But that's your own fault. You built this contraption and now you have to sit in it. And if you guys suffer losses because your decision to promote and prop up this disaster for the better part of 4 years leads to consequences, leads to a lack of faith in your abilities to govern, well, whose fault was that? Oy, Columba. Quote, "This is no longer about Joe Biden's family or his emotions," said an advisor in constant touch with the West Wing. "This is about our country. It is an utter effing disaster that has to be addressed," unquote. Whoever that person is, put that person in a position of authority. And give me their name. That is somebody who I want to give kudos to for at least being honest. I want to know who that advisor is. If they're anywhere near the West Wing. I mean, an advisor in touch with the West Wing that tells me it's an outsider, so who knows who it is. I hate this anonymous bullshit sometimes, especially when it's not like their life or something is at risk. Just anyway. But whoever that is, you're being completely honest. Thankfully honest. "It'll take a while for the oligarchy to process the stakes," this advisor argued, quote, "but there will be a reckoning." What does that even mean? Biden's unelected cabal of advisors and handlers are, there will be a reckoning. Against who? For what? Behind the scenes, Biden insiders are already finding it easier than many realize to rationalize staying in. Of course, their entire careers and paychecks are tied to this man being president, to this legacy continuing. Of course. If he's not president, most of these guys are not going to have a job the next day because everybody who managed and handled and propped this up is going to be looked at with justifiable suspicion in anything they do afterwards. They have to milk this for as long as they can. And they're hoping for an additional 4 years. They argue, yes, he had a poor debate performance, but Biden also can dial up vigorous appearances like he did in Raleigh on Friday afternoon. Yeah, it's amazing. During the daytime and with a teleprompter, somehow Biden really comes across as almost kind of sort of there. Gosh, once the sun sets and he's not given notes to read off of, what happens? So, how does Biden operate spontaneously behind closed doors without guidance as the president of the United States? That's what the debate uncovered. That's the question the debate put in the minds of anybody thinking about it for 5 seconds. Oh my gosh, he gave a vigorous appearance in Raleigh. Oh, under prime and staged conditions? You don't say. Left to his own devices on a stage against a political opponent? Yeah. That behind-the-scenes juxtaposition plays out daily. Sometimes he's on his game, sharper than people would think, and quicker on his feet. Yeah. Why is that? Why wasn't he that way on Thursday night? But often it's the Biden you saw on the debate stage, tired, slow, halting. Yeah, and we've seen it for years. This is not a new piece of information for anybody paying attention. Top Democrats saw what America saw live on national TV, you don't say, vividly and unforgettably. They can't unsee it, and they fear voters won't unsee it. I hope they don't. I hope they understand what they're getting into if they put this man up for another 4 years, let alone the remaining 5 or 6 months in this year up to the point of the election and afterwards. No longer can they blame critics or edited footage or media exaggeration. Well, they had no justification on which to do it in the first place, did they? They can't blame critics on or edited footage. Blame critics. You mean blame people looking at things with their own eyes and calling a spade a spade? Yeah, I know. It's amazing, isn't it? Did Biden just say the wrong country when talking about a war in the Middle East? Why, yes, he did. No, he didn't. It was just stuttering. He has a stutter since he was a child. Every misstep, verbal hiccup, or frozen face will zip across social media and TV, reminding voters Biden will be 86 years old at the end of his second term. I don't need to be reminded he's going to be 86 years old at the end of his second term. I'm reminded that he's over 80 now and he can't operate on his own. There's some footage that's going around, and it's not a fake, of after the debate, of Biden being led off the stage. His wife comes over and has to help him go down 2 steps. And in the meantime, between that moment and him getting down those steps, he looks like he is lost. I mean, The idea that this is elder abuse has been brought up many times. And for whatever disagreements I might have with Biden's policies or attitude or anything else, there comes a line that is very difficult for someone with a heart to cross. And that is when you see an elderly, feeble individual being taken advantage of by the people around them. I mean, it's really difficult to look at that and not feel a sense of illness in my stomach, even for Joe Biden. Because there's something like humanity that kind of supersedes sometimes political or policy disagreements. And especially in my own personal life, seeing someone who is, if I saw anyone managing my father or my mother the way that I see the people around Biden managing him, I would step in immediately and say something, because I'd be suspicious of their motives. I'd be suspicious of their common decency. Quote, "They need to tell him the absolute truth about where he is," said a well-known Democrat who often talks to the president. Yeah. Okay, Joe, do you know what day it is? Do you know what country you are in? That's not what this person meant when they said that, but it's also not irrelevant to say that too. Quote, "Loyalty doesn't mean blind loyalty." Oh, are you sure about that? Are you sure about that? John Cena busts in. Are you sure about that? When it comes to someone as arrogant and self-centered as Joe Biden, are you sure? "Candidates for House, Senate, governor, state legislator are going to be in survival mode," the well-known Democrat added. Why not tell us the name? Who's the well-known Democrat? Why is anonymity here? Why? If this is what this person really thinks, what well-known Democrat? That is this a politician? Is this just someone who's registered with the Democratic Party? They're not going to go down with the ship, and the ship is in a bad place. Yeah. Yeah, a lot of these guys up for re-election or election, they don't want to be seen with Joe Biden. They don't want to lash themselves to the sails of this sinking ship. So what do? How do you show your party loyalty when you know that putting yourself next to Biden is going to be a drag on your voter base? What we're hearing. Oh, you mean everything above this wasn't? Some Biden family members are digging in. Wow, okay. Squinting at overnight polls for signs that undecided voters move Biden's way because of Trump's statements at the debate. Trump was Trump at the debate. There was no mystery there. There was no revelation. Biden at the debate was the revelation, because most people either hadn't seen it on display that blatantly or could no longer just sort of candy coat other things. I mean, the proof was in the pudding at CNN. You saw the reaction of that panel on CNN. If you haven't seen that already, look it up. Look up like CNN reaction to debate or something on YouTube, and just watch. Just watch as that entire panel, whether conservative or liberal leaning or whatever, none of them could pretend they didn't see what they just saw. Quote, "They know it was a disaster," said a source close to the family, "but they think there's a glimmer of survival/hope. They should be putting Joe Biden into a home. Their concern is the political angle of his life. They should be thinking about the quality of his life, but that's not their concern. Milking this old man for as much prestige, money, power, and influence as possible up to the very last moment. Getting 4 more years so they can still be embedded in politics for another 4 years and influential. That's their concern." In a Biden campaign memo, quote, "Independent voters moved to Biden in debate." Really? Unquote, officials wrote. A Biden campaign memo said independent movers moved to Biden in debate. Quote, "Based on research we conducted during the debate, it is clear that the more voters heard from Donald Trump, the more they remembered why they disliked him," unquote. Okay, disliking Donald Trump does not mean they're going to vote for Biden. They might just say to hell with it and stay out. Biden, bolstered by a tweet From former President Obama, quote, bad debate nights happen, trust me, I know, unquote, sounds like he wants to stick it out. Quote, when you get knocked down, you get back up, Biden said to applause, reading from a teleprompter during a rally Friday at the North Carolina State Fairgrounds. You know what? If Biden really, really wanted to dispel or dissuade concerns, he would ban teleprompters at his rallies. He would just speak extemporaneously, you know, just off the cuff. If he wanted to at least try to disabuse people of a belief that he's incapable of handling himself, he should ban teleprompters from the rest of the campaign. He should. If he did that and he still was able to maintain coherency, you know, and a line of thought and statements and so on and so forth, you know, I could suspect that he had an earpiece in, but if he banned teleprompters, hell, I'd be impressed. Quote, folks, I don't walk as easy as I used to. I don't speak as smoothly as I used to. I don't debate as well as I used to, but I know how to tell the truth, unquote. Yeah, you beat Medicare and not a single soldier has lost their life under your tenure. And also, as I said on Twitter when this came out, I said, give me that classic phrase, damning with faint praise. What we're watching, the public backing of former presidents and current members of Congress say little about Biden's future. Most know him too well and for too long to humiliate him in public. It's not about humiliation. It's about being realistic. It's about pragmatism. Did you notice something during the debate? A lot of people noticed this. I noticed it too while it was happening. For everything that Donald Trump is, he can be, and has been at times, a schoolyard bully, a petty, sniping schoolyard bully. But did you notice how he didn't go for the lowest hanging fruit in that debate? I mean, it's the thinnest of silver linings, let's say. And the only credit that I'll give Donald Trump and his behavior that night as far as being a professional or anything, but he could have made any kind of snide remarks he wanted about how Biden was operating there. But he didn't. The closest he got is Biden said something and then Trump comes back with, well, I'm not sure I understood what he said and I'm pretty sure he didn't either. And then later on talked about cognitive tests as an implication, which, given the performance on the debate stage, was not an irrelevant or unjustified thing to say. But he didn't go for the lowest common denominator of humor or attack. In that instance, at least, which I mean, credit where credit, but then again, he didn't need to. It was obvious. It was self-evident, as they say. Instead, if he decides to go, and I think that means go as in not campaign or not continue with the campaign, it'll follow private conversations with them being his unelected cabal of advisors and handlers, then a decision with this oligarchy. Wait, if he decides to go, it'll follow private conversations with them. I don't know who them is in this instance. Then a decision with his oligarchy. Remember, it's under 8 weeks until Biden is ratified as the official nominee. That's the clock to watch. What they're saying, James Carville, the Ragin' Cajun, who masterminded Bill Clinton's first presidential campaign in 1992 and now is a frequent TV pundit, and also said, it's the economy, stupid. And how's that going for Biden? Will be 80 in October. He told us that if he appeared like Biden did during the debate, he'd want to be pulled off the tube. Quote, I never thought this was a nifty idea, Carville said of Biden's run. He said there are few people the president really listens to. Quote, he doesn't have advisors, he has employees, unquote. No, he has handlers. Carville. He is on strings. Have you watched him at public events? He's being told where to go, what to say, how much time he has. How many times do we hear him say, oh, I don't know if I'm allowed to say that? The president of the United States is looking around to see if he's allowed to say something to the people around him. And he has to have people come onto stage and take him by his arm to lead him in the right direction so he doesn't go wandering off into the la-la land We saw it with Obama at the G7. We saw it at the end of the debate. He doesn't have employees. He has nursemaids. When we pressed Carville on whether he thinks Biden will be off the ticket by Election Day, he says he thinks so. He invoked a famous quote by the late economist Herb Stein, which Carville paraphrased as, quote, "That which can't continue won't." I agree with him. I agree with him. And the Democratic convention is going to be an amazing thing to watch, and the time leading up to it. But the real question that people should be asking is not, is Biden going to continue with the campaign? Is, should Biden still be in office? Should Biden step down from the presidency? Should the 25th Amendment have to be invoked here? That's the question that hardly anybody in the mainstream press is really thinking about that or saying it out loud, when it is obvious that it should be talked about. It should be debated, publicly debated. It should have been for years now, but certainly now. Oh, but there's only like 6 months left in the presidency for him, even if he doesn't run again. That's beside the point. The operation of our country, our national security, and everything else is dependent on someone being at the wheel that knows that it's a wheel and not a donut. Anyway, I'm just about done, so I'll take a moment here for anything you guys want to say. Any other hellos and such I can do here? Let's see. Did I say hello to Anthem Ward? Anthem Ward, good morning. Joe Biden isn't using a teleprompter. He has an earpiece. If you watch a few times, he fiddles with it during the debate. Well, I mentioned that during the stream with Sinatra. He kept reaching up to his ear and kind of scratching his ear, and I was like, does he have an earpiece? And how terrible a thing, how even more terrible a thing would it be to find out that Joe Biden had an earpiece during the debate, that even with direct assistance from an outside party, that was the best he could do. I don't know if he had an earpiece. I really wondered. It'd be worse if we found out that was so. Let's see. Rib Rascal. Notice how Carville and the Crypt Keeper from Creepshow are never in the same room at the same time. Oh man, James Carville, what a character. I mean, I always found him entertaining. I'm glad he was never actually in charge of things, but just a campaign manager, that kind of deal. And a commentator as that goes, he's always been entertaining. I haven't agreed with him on everything, but if you watch that documentary from the 90s, The War Room, where you see him and Stephanopoulos and everybody else behind the scenes in the Clinton campaign, man, that's there's a couple of political documentaries that I cannot recommend highly enough. There's The War Room, and there's also one called A Perfect Candidate, which follows the Oliver North, I think, Senate campaign back in the 90s. If you want to see, especially in the A Perfect Candidate documentary, I think you can probably find it online free somewhere now. If you want to see unfiltered politics, how things work behind the scenes, there is this, and it's a very famous portion of that documentary with Oliver North, A Perfect Candidate. There's this one moment, and I think his name was Mark Meadows or something like that. Anyway, he's one of Oliver North's campaign managers. And there's this entirely unfiltered, candid moment about maybe 3/4 of the way through the film where he's musing out loud to the cameraman about the game of politics and the show of politics. I can't recreate it here. I won't try to, but I can't recommend that documentary highly enough to show what the reality can be behind the scenes. And I realize it's a documentary, it's through somebody's eyes, but there are so many raw and real moments about on the ground political strategy that are timeless, absolutely timeless. So if you have an opportunity, if you can find it, look for A Perfect Candidate about the Oliver North run. Not for Oliver North, not even for a partisan kind of thing, just for a little bucket of cold water and some of the realities of politics outside of all the hubbub and the X and the Twitter and everything else. It's something. It's very enlightening. Anything else before I start wrapping up? Shadowclaw, you know how many laws these handlers committed, especially upping his stims? Oh, or how many laws? Well, yeah, here's the thing. Yeah, we don't know. We don't know. I mean, this article just kind of scratches the surface of the implications of a president that at least halfway out of every day is unable to think straight or talk or keep a thought in his head. But he's surrounded by people who are his oligarchy, unelected people, not even people who are official appointees or anything. His personal, private oligarchy. I keep having visions of like Eleanor Roosevelt effectively acting as president in her husband's stead because he was basically incapable because of his illness. What this article implies to me is the elements of a constitutional crisis. How much and to what extent have Joe Biden's personal friends and family members had in manipulating the presidency these last 3.5 years? It's an honest and justified question to ask. I mean, setting aside the 25th Amendment thing, which is still important. And yeah, anyway, I could go on, but I think I've done enough. In between baling gum and bubble wire. Attempt to coin new buzzword or buzz phrase. There you go, everybody. Baling gum and bubble wire. That's what the Biden campaign is held together with right now. And perhaps even my own thoughts and processes on a Sunday morning, where apparently I'm still waking up. Oh, Mark Merritt. I apologize. Yes, Advocates Daily. Pardon me. It wasn't Mark Meadows, Mark Merritt. Okay, I think, yes. I wasn't sure. I was Mark something. I knew it was MM, and for some reason I went to Mark Meadows. But yeah, so Mark Merritt. If that is correct, the name, then yes, that's probably so. But either way, look up the documentary. I bet it's on Internet Archive somewhere, or maybe it's even on YouTube. It's old enough now, it's probably out there somewhere. Excellent, enlightening documentary. And think about that. As you're watching the rest of this presidential campaign unfold, keep those little bits of information in mind from that documentary and what goes on behind the scenes, how people manage things, and how people see the political process in this country. A perfect candidate's name. Yes, a perfect candidate. All right, everyone. I'm going to call it here. Again, thank you guys so much for joining me. Let me know in the comments below or on Discord, because I did remember to make a Discord link this time, if you can believe it. Discord link is in the chat now, either in the comments or in Discord, what you thought about these articles, these stories, these court decisions, what you think about the debate, the prospect for Biden becoming the nominee again or not. I appreciate your interaction. Leave a like on the way out if you would, or a dislike if you didn't like it. That's fine. But also, if you like this kind of thing or any other content from a creator on YouTube, please share that stuff out and let people know that you're doing so. And especially let the creator know you're doing so if you're able to, because I tell you what, I know I appreciate it when you guys do it. And I try to say thank you to everybody who does. With that, everyone, again, thanks for joining me. Moderators, thank you for keeping an eye on things, even though everyone here is so well behaved. You have very, very little to do. Everybody who donated either to myself or to the GoFundMe at the pin at the top of the chat box, thank you guys so much for your generosity. Really do appreciate it. Oh, by the way, the Discord secret word for today is oligarchy. Yeah, if you want to join the Discord server, just go to that link there. You'll find yourself on the landing channel called Say Hello. And in addition to saying hello, just say hello, oligarchy. And I'll know that you actually watched the stream and are not a bot. And then you can become a member of the Discord server. There you go. I almost forgot to do that. But almost being the operative word. Everyone, hope you have a good rest of your Sunday. Hope you have a good weekend ahead of you, for whatever is remaining of it. Also, a pre-emptory happy 4th of July, because it's going to be a long weekend next weekend. Probably taking Friday off myself if I can. Otherwise, I hope you're all safe and well. If you're not well, please get well soon, and I will see you on the next one. Take care.